just turn to this question of the border. If the point of this, from Turkey's point of view, and it certainly would be from the UK's point of view, is this idea of frictionless trade. We made a visit to the port of Dover, I don't know when, about a year ago, maybe more, and we saw this seamless, massive ballet, if you like, of the trucks coming off the ferries with minimal checks and so on. And the government's aim, I think, is to maintain that as much as possible. But in previous evidence, we have heard, it might even have been evidence from you, Dr. Artiran, that there are sometimes significant delays for trucks at the border between Turkey and the EU. If Turkey's in a customs union, in large part to facilitate ease of trade between Turkey and the rest of the EU, why are there truck delays at the border, and what do you do about that?
Question. I remember your question
yes.
previous time, and that's exactly the point. Now, I mean, Turkey and some of the EU member states with whom we have problems, for instance, Bulgaria, they are trying to negotiate with Greece. Why? We're having this problem. We have to get rid of it. The answer is simple. Actually, because in that, policy area for road transportation, the European Commission does not have the authority to negotiate. So the member states keep their independence. How to regulate the road transportation, that's where the problem arises. The Commission has good intentions, the EU in general has good intentions, and we all know what the problem is about and everybody wants to solve. But to the extent this policy will remain within the independent policies of the member state, there's nothing much we can do. So that has to be regulated at the Commission level, at the Brussels level, so that the authority of the member state, independent authority, will be transferred to a certain extent to the Commission, to the European Union, because otherwise that is really a friction, even though the countries may have good intentions, but in reality, yes, your trucks are unfortunately stuck on the road.
Give us a picture of what this looks like for a truck driver approaching the border. How long might they be delayed there?
Well, I mean, last time I remember you had asked the same question and I said 3 days. I heard sometimes it's even longer, sometimes it's shorter. I don't think there's an harmonious length to how long you're waiting.
And the implication in your previous answer was this truck that might be delayed for 2 or 3 days or even longer, Turkey's desired remedy for that is to appeal to the European Commission and to Brussels to sort out the delays.
We did to the European Court of Justice.
You appealed to the European Court. So your ally in this, in order to prevent the delays at the border, is the European Court of Justice. That's who you're appealing to from outside the EU.
Exactly. I mean, I remember saying this already, 2 years ago. What you can do actually, Turkey, because we're not a member of the European Union, we don't have direct access to the European Court of Justice. But what is being done in those kind of, problems, the company, the European company who is doing business with the Turkish company has a legal standing before the European Court of Justice. So those European companies, because they suffer out of their business friction with Turkish companies, they brought the case to the European Court of Justice, and the European Court of Justice said that this is not acceptable. Even though Turkey is not a member of the European Union, it just has a customs union.
Yes.
That customs union also necessitates the European Union to provide frictionless trade to Turkey. So it is approved now. I mean, I think this is a settled case. This is now a precedent. I think, that is something that the European Union has to address.
So for a country in a customs union with the EU, but outside the EU in terms of membership, the guarantor of frictionless free trade for that country is the ECJ.
Although I think it does depend on the nature of the relationship. So if we assume that the UK-EU future relationship is going to be quite expansive, so customs union might be one pillar of it, we'd assume there's a pillar on services, probably unless we accept freedom of movement doesn't go much further than GATS. But then there's another pillar on research cooperation, on home affairs and the like. And sitting above that would be some sort of institutional architecture where we would continue the dialogue and bring complaints. So in that circumstance, you could see that body there being where you first brought this issue rather than the ECJ, but this is very much dependent. This is a hypothetical.
That's a hypothetical. And then, I'm talking about the actual existing world.
But then in the issue on the border, the other issue you have, I suppose, is on sanitary and phytosanitary issues, and this is an issue for Turkey, in that if you're outside of the European Union and you send a product of animal origin into the European Union, it has to enter via a veterinary border inspection post, where physical inspections are carried out up to a rate of 50%. That can be reduced by agreement, and then also document checks and identity checks are carried out. So unless we are within the SPS area of the EU, including for imports from third countries, those checks, whilst they can be reduced in terms of frequency, cannot be avoided.
Can I just compliment on
I think
what
I'm being encouraged to.
Just very quickly. Very, very quick point again. I don't know very much about Turkey, but I do know about the United Kingdom. And it's interesting that when it comes to this problem of frictionless borders, that both the HMRC and indeed the Port of Calais have said that even in the case of a no deal, never mind about not being in the customs union, if in the case of a no deal, they would actually prioritise fluidity of trade over compliance. They have said that because they realise it's in their interests to keep frictionless trade or to minimise the frictions of trade across the borders, even in the case of no deal.
If they're the deciding
authority. But as I say, I'm not an expert on Turkey.
Now, this is... Joanna, just a quick question.
That's very interesting, but that is a unilateral guarantee on the British side. There's no guarantee on the EU side that degree of frictionless trade will be guaranteed, is there?
Well, believe me, I think actually, didn't someone come from the Port of Calais and give you evidence at some point? Well,
the question I'm asking you is, I'm not talking about an individual from the Port of Calais, I'm talking about the rules and regulations of the European Union. You're saying that certain people in the UK have given a guarantee that they would do their best to maintain frictionless trade on the UK side of the border. What I'm putting to you is that there has been no matching guarantee from the European Union, because there can't be, because that would be in violation of their law.
I think my understanding is that obviously they've come out with some no-deal preparation documentation within the Commission, and they have made it very clear that they wish to continue with trade. Obviously, you can't talk about guarantees, but I'm talking about the pragmatic.
But they haven't given any guarantee that they would set aside the law of the European Union, have they?
They have made it, I think, fairly clear that they want to continue with the trade and with a good relationship with trade with the United Kingdom. And that, for me, even in a no-deal circumstance, so I think they've made it abundantly clear that they actually want to continue.
See, I would disagree with you, because they talked about short-term solutions. What I'm asking you about is the law. There has been no guarantee from the European Union that they would put aside their rules and regulations, because in law they could not give such a guarantee. Is that not the case?
Well, I think with under WTO rules, if they started to discriminate against our trade, especially if our regulations were pretty compliant with the EU trade, they would actually be hauled over the coals in the WTO and said they were infringing the WTO.
But I see others shaking their heads. What puzzles me about how you feel that you can say that is that the European Union is already a customs union and a single market, which by definition applies different rules and regulations to third parties. I don't see the WTO have any problem with that at present, do they? That'd be, no doubt be corrected by these other experts if I'm wrong.
Just briefly, I suppose the question is, can someone at the Port of Calais set aside the rules of the European Union when it comes to checking goods coming in from third countries? What's the answer to that?
No.
No.
And we should also be careful when people representing ports speak, because they are competing with each other for business. So there is a necessity to talk up your ability to deal with additional friction at the border in order to avoid diversion. And on the WTO front, of course not. If we are a third country, the EU should treat us as they do every other third country. And actually they're less likely to get into trouble for actually being mean to us as they are to being too nice.
Is that your view too, Mr. Henig?
Yes.
It is. Okay, fine.